Brahma downwards, all the worlds are subject to return to rebirth, but on reaching me, O son of Kunti Arjun, there is no return to rebirth again. Shri Krishna says that from the realm of Brahma downwards, all the worlds are subject to return to rebirth and are repetitive, but on reaching him, coming near to him and attaining him, there is no return to birth again. God says that any world, be it Prithvi Lok, the realm of the earth, Swarg Lok, the realm of heaven, or Brahma Lok, the realm of Brahma, all of these realms are repetitive and are subject to return to rebirth. But one who has come near to God and has held on to God, such a person does not return to birth again. A person should hold on to God's hand, and a person should know how to hold on to the right person's hand. There is a true story in the Saurashtra region of Gujarat in India. If a person knows how to hold the right person's hand, then he will have no worries in life and he will not have an attitude of worrying. It was in the village. A person in the village was a Rajput from a royal background, and he was working at a landlord's. He was a young man. He was very authentic and courageous. He was working at a landlord's land. He had a wife and a child. Even today, if you go to Saurashtra, then you'll be able to tell if a lady is a Rajput from a royal background. The men are very courageous and the women are very beautiful. They have very sharp features. This youth was working at the landlord's. He was protecting the farm at night and was standing up. 8 to 10 burglars came and they began cutting the crops in order to steal them. At that time, this youth jumped with a stick in his hand. These people had come with blades and knives, and there were 10 of them compared to one of him. He fought 3 or 4 people, but he was unable to get any more, and he died. He died protecting the landlord's land. His wife became a widow. The people in the town told her that this youth passed away protecting the landlord's land and crops and fighting with burglars. They told her to speak to the landlord and that he may be able to help her because she has a child, she is young, and she has to live the rest of her life. They told her that maybe the landlord will help her and that everything would work out for her. The people around this poor girl gave her advice. She went to the landlord and told him that my husband was working for you, and while fighting with these burglars and protecting your wealth, my husband passed away. The woman described this, and the landlord had vast amounts of wealth, but was that much covetous. This woman was describing her sorrows, and this landlord gaze kept falling on her body. He saw her beauty and he became tempted. He told her, "What can we do? While he was there, I was giving him a salary, but does your husband have no intelligence? Your husband must be stupid that if the food was being taken away, then he should have just let it happen. If there were 10 people, then does he not know that he was going to die because all of them had weapons? Your husband is regarded as stupid." Then the landlord revealed the desires, wishes and feelings in his mind and to the woman, and told her in the Saurashtra language that "Tane dhari dalta na avaryo." You have also perhaps made a mistake that you did not know how to choose a husband. When the young lady who was a Rajput from a royal background heard this, she was so filled with sorrows that she would not be able to tolerate this. She realized what he was trying to say, and she gave an answer in only one sentence that "Mane to dhari tarta avaryo, but mara dhari ne dhari tarta na avaryo," meaning I knew how to choose a husband, but my husband did not know how to choose a provider. She meant that instead of working for you, if my husband had worked for someone else and passed away, then that person would have made arrangements for my whole life. I knew how to choose a husband, but my husband did not know how to choose a provider. What I mean is to say that saints give a very beautiful example that it's very important that one holds on to the right person's hand. Shri Krishna is saying the same thing here, that on reaching me, there is no return to birth again. While one lives in the material world, then the cycle of birth and death will keep running, but once one goes to God, and once one has placed his hands into God's hands, then there is no return to rebirth again. Then how can this birth happen? It does not remain. While a human being is, in the perspective, is united with a feeling of seeing differences, then during that time he remains Alpatma, small soul. And while he remains an Alpatma, small soul, he has to take rebirth again. And in all the worlds that are there until Brahma Lok, the realm of Brahma, if you collect punya, the opposite of sins, then you'll go to heaven, a body of a Dev god, and in Brahma Lok, the realm of Brahma, but Shine punya martalokam vishanti. When one's punya, the opposite of sins, get run out, then one goes back into the world of life and death in a human body. Shri Krishna said this in the 6th chapter, that when punya, the opposite of sins run out, and the pot of punya, its opposite of sins, becomes expended, then one has to take rebirth again and has to come back to the earth. All these worlds are subject to rebirth and have the nature of rebirth. The word bhuvanal, realm, is used in Brahma Bhuvana, the realm of Brahma. Anyone know what bhuvanal means? The world, it is defined as bhavanti asmin bhutananti iti bhuvanam, which is the world is that in which beings appear. And the place where Brahma appears is Brahma Bhuvanam, Brahma Lok iti Artaha, which is Brahma Bhuvana, the realm of Brahma. This is Brahma Lok, the realm of Brahma. It has the nature of rebirth. What is the reason for this? Why are they subject to return to rebirth? Srimad Adi Shankaracharya Ji gives the answer that Kal Parichanatva, they are finite in time. They all have a limit in time. That is why they are subject to return to rebirth. They are all within the material world. That is, they are within the limits of time and have to be repeated because, as we saw earlier, it is the nature of the mind that it keeps wanting something new and it has to do the same one activity each time it comes back to the material world. This is a reason for sorrow. The reason why one has to come back to the cycle of birth and death over and over again is because human beings forget God and think about and remember the material world and objects. And when they remember the material world and think about the material world, they forget their root form, their pure form, and their absolute form. They forget this absoluteness. He begins forgetting that I am God, and wherever one remembers, whatever one remembers, they become like them. And as a consequence, they keep turning in the circle of birth and death in Maya illusion. And he keeps making this mistake knowingly over and over again. It is not as if he is having forgotten. He keeps doing it over and over again. A collection of samskar, imprints, have been gathered throughout all his births, and that is why he keeps doing it over and over again. It is said about Mahavir Swami of the Jain religion that if a disciple would go to him and attain some qualifications, then Mahavir Swami would show him his previous births. He would ask this person what he wanted to attain, having performed sadhana efforts, and a person would say that he wants to gather wealth. Mahavir Swami would then say, look at how much wealth you have gathered in your previous births. Look how much wealth you earned, but did you attain happiness? Another person would say, I want a beautiful wife. Mahavir Swami would say, look at your previous life. You had thousands of births. Look how many beautiful wives had come in those births. But were you happy? And beauty is a relative thing. If a person goes into an animal body, then a male dog finds a female dog beautiful. If he's a male donkey, then he finds a female donkey beautiful. Beauty is a relative thing. People have this. But this attraction was there in your previous births as well, yet you did not become released from it. You have enjoyed many material pleasures, yet you have not come out of this attraction. Human beings keep making the same one mistake over and over again. This is the reason for their sorrows. The difference between the East and the West is that Dharma has developed in the East, whereas science has developed in the West in the last 500 years. The root objectives are different. This is because the West considers that the reason for a person's sorrows are outer circumstances. They therefore say that if you change the person's outer circumstances, then you can make the person happy. Science makes efforts to change the outer circumstances, but it failed. The outer circumstances changed a lot, and it gave people a lot of instruments for happiness, but people's sorrows did not go away. Even Freud, who carried out so much research and is called the father of modern psychology, was in his last moments because he was so ill, and Freud knew that he was only a guest for 2 or 4 days more. At that time, it was asked to Freud that, Freud, you carried out so much research and you've understood the mind of human beings very much. Do you think that you can make a human being happy after so much advancement, study and research in the field of modern psychology? Freud replied, no, I do not think that from the study and research in the field of modern psychology that human beings can be made happy. The person then asked, then what is all the purpose of all this research and study? Freud said, it has only one meaning. It can make a person understand all the sorrows that he has collected, and it can make those sorrows bearable. It can put someone in a state where he can bear no sorrows. This is the work that modern psychology does, but it cannot make human beings happy. This is because human beings have given rise to these sorrows themselves. And Dharma of the East says the same thing, that the thoughts in the inner means of thinking of human beings create sorrows for human beings. Therefore, if you wish to make someone happy, then it will not work by changing their outer circumstances or by modern psychological medications such as drugs and other medicines that are given by modern psychologists. None of this will make the person happy. It can only make the sorrows bearable, but it cannot make them happy. How can you make human beings happy? It is by changing the inner thoughts of human beings. It is by changing the way of thinking of human beings. It is by changing what is going on the inside. If you do this, then human beings will be happy. The proof is right in front of us that Western science has remained unsuccessful in trying to make human beings happy by changing their outer circumstances. And we have unlimited proofs that the Dharma of the East and the Rishis of the East have been successful in making human beings happy by changing their inner thoughts. You can make human beings happy. Shri Krishna says in this verse that the material world is dukkhalayam, a place of sorrow, and ashashvata, impermanent. Human beings, there's only one root reason for this. Human beings make efforts throughout their whole lives to make steady that which is by its nature temporary and changing. As a consequence, people get sorrows in their lives. The very meaning of the word sansar, the material world, is samsarati iti sansara, that which is depleting at every moment. The meaning of the word jagat, world, is gachati iti jagat, that which is moving is the world. And we make efforts to hold on to that which is always moving. The river keeps flowing and flowing, and we make efforts to hold it in our hands. Is this not stupidity? In the same way, the flow of the world is going on, and we are making efforts to stop it. If pebbles are moving with the flow of the river, then some pebbles may come with the river, and some pebbles may be separated from the flow. It is possible that one pebble says that another pebble should always come with it. This cannot happen. In the same way, in the field of relationships, in the field of objects, and the field of circumstances, this grand river of time is flowing, and we are all pebbles in it. We come closer to each other, and we always make the mistake in trying to keep steady the objects, people, and circumstances that come to us, or in trying to think that things should remain in the way that we expect them. But this is not possible. And because we do not understand this principle of the material world, we do not accept this principle of the material world, and we do not arrange the means of our lives in this way. That is why the material world is dukkhalayam, the place of sorrow. We search for permanence in something that is temporary, and we go to that which is permanent on a temporary basis. On one side, the Supreme Soul is permanent, the Supreme Soul is eternal, and the Supreme Soul is a form of Satchidanand, existence, wisdom, bliss. Yet if we find time for the Supreme Soul during the day, then we sit by him for 10 minutes, otherwise we do not sit there. How can such a human being make the sorrows go away, and how can such a human being get happiness? This is because they stay with the source of sorrows on a constant basis, and did not go to that from which happiness is manifest. This is as if a person is thirsty and is sitting by a fire, yet not going to the flowing river. This person is telling the fire that he is thirsty, but he should get up from there and go to the river. Nothing in the river is going to reduce if he drinks 2 or 3 gulps of water. That is what human beings do. Human beings constantly think about the material world. What is the material world like? It is punarvartino, subject to return to rebirth. That is the nature of the material world. It is repetitive. It keeps coming back over and over again to what it was before. Kachalal was close to his death, and he was asked that, Kachalal, if the Supreme Soul showers his grace on you, and you're able to live your whole life again, so that you are made a 5-year-old child again, and you can live the 70 years you have lived all over again, then would you make the same mistakes that you made in your life? Kachalal said that, yes, I'll certainly make those mistakes again. I will make the same mistakes again that I made before, but if I were to improve them, then I would make those mistakes quicker than before. The person asked him why he would make those mistakes quicker. Kachalal replied that I got the wish to make many more mistakes, but I was not able to make them because time was short. If I make those mistakes quickly, then I'll be able to make other mistakes as well. I thought for 5 to 10 years before marrying my wife, and then after living with her for 20 years, we became separated. Therefore, I should have got married 10 years earlier and become separated after 5 years, so I can know what will happen afterwards. I'll certainly make the same mistakes that I made, but I'll make them quicker. This is the nature of human beings. This is the attitude. They make the same mistakes that they made earlier in their lives over and over again. The material world is punarvartino, subject to return to rebirth. But Shri Krishna is saying to Arjuna that on reaching him with a capital H, there is no return to rebirth again, no return to birth again. The reason for this is that when one attains the Supreme Soul, then they get the experience of eternity. When one attains the Supreme Soul, then vasanas, desires fall away. And when one attains the Supreme Soul, then because the Supreme Soul is beyond time, and therefore when one reaches that which is beyond time, all time falls away. And because all time falls away, vasana, desires, fall away. This is because the path of making vasana, desires, run is time. This is because the path of making vasanas run is time. Vasanas, desires, run on the path of time. When time falls away, then vasanas, mental impressions, are not able to run. The Gita says this, but every great saint, all the preachers of Dharma, all the wise people, and all those who have achieved great things in their lives have said one thing. Jesus Christ gave the name Kingdom of God to what we call the Swarg, heaven. Christ was asked that, what is in your kingdom of God? What is unique about it? At that time, Christ said, there shall be time no longer. Because there is no time, it does not mean that there will be no clocks. It means that there will be no running of vasana, desires. That is why human beings will not be able to not be hungry for time, will not have expectations for the future, and will not have vasanas, desires, or attraction for the future. There shall be time no longer. Think about it for one moment that you have no investment in the future, and you do not think, for example, that I'll wake up tomorrow and this will happen, I'll do this the day after tomorrow, I'll do this after 2 years. All these arrangements we have made about expectations for the future, think about it for 5 minutes that none of these are there, and experience how much like a blooming flower you become. The reason for all the stresses and burdens that we see on people's faces, on people's heads, and on people's foreheads is that we have placed so much emphasis and investment on the future that we do not know whether it will be there in the future or not, yet we have placed a lot there. A person buys a 25-year-old bonds at the age of 80. He thinks that he has £175,000 now and he'll earn £25,000, so he'll end up with £200,000. A clever person, he won't even be there in 25 years' time. And yet despite this, he gets out the bonds at Diwali time and puts vermilion on it. How much have we invested in the future? Christ says that there shall be time no longer. The same thing here is said by the Supreme Soul. What is the proof that one has attained the Supreme Soul? One who has attained the Supreme Soul becomes like a blooming flower. This is because he lives in the present. He has not placed piles of his happiness, his bliss, his expectations in the future. If he is happy, then he is happy now, and if he is sad, then he is sad only now. There is no burden of his sorrows in the future, and there is no burden of his happiness in the future. Even if we are happy now, we may get sorrows thinking about the future. For example, we may think that it is like this now, but what if something happens in 2 years? We place pots of sorrows in the future. And if we are sad now, then we think that the leaf may turn over in the future and that we will become happy. We keep pots of happiness in the future. The meaning of this is that our expectations of the future never becomes empty. And for one who has attained the Supreme Soul, there is not even a question of his expectations for the future become empty. He has no expectations in anything at all. He has no investment in anything. There shall be time no longer. The method of worship, meditation, or prayers performed for Mahavir Swami of the Jain religion is called samayik, meaning transcending time. Therefore, they make efforts in order to transcend time and to swim over time during each and every moment. While one is performing worship, there is no time at all. Christ says that there shall be time no longer. Mahavir Swami says that this time will fall away. Buddha said the same thing, that vasana, desires, are dushpur, that which can never become fulfilled. What are the efforts in order to try to fulfill vasanas like? Bhagwan Buddha says, while giving the example, that it's like putting a bucket inside a well, pulling the rope to bring the bucket up, and making efforts to fill the bucket, yet that bucket is such that it's bottomless. While that bucket is in the well, it feels as if it is being filled. You think that you just need to pull it up. This is because while it is in the well, the buckets look the same whether they have a bottom or if they're bottomless. One can only tell us when they pull them up. And the bucket of vasanas, desires, is such that it is bottomless. If the thought of this of the well, no, because the well has water. The fault of this is not in the well. The fault of this is also not of the efforts, because a person makes as much efforts in order to fill a bucket with the bottom as he does with the bottomless bucket, there is no difference in efforts. Both of these buckets look the same while they're dipped in the well, but one realizes the difference when they're brought back up. Upasana, penances, Anushthan from worship, and bhakti devotion are like buckets with bottoms, whereas Vasana, desires, is a bottomless bucket that we have dipped into the well of existence. You should pull it out and then you will know. When you pull out the bucket of bhakti devotion, then the bucket will come up filled with something and it gets rid of our thirst and the people around us. But when you pull out the bucket of Vasana, desires, then everything inside the bucket is empty, and when the bucket comes outside, then neither does it get rid of our thirst, nor does it get rid of the thirst of others. That is why it is dushpur, that which can never become fulfilled. Life is repetitive because wishes are repetitive. When a human being reaches the Supreme Soul, then he becomes without wishes, and because he becomes without wishes, one who becomes liberated from wishes does not attain rebirth again. We'll take the next verse next Tuesday. So I'll close